A piece of string walks into a bar and walks up to the bartender. He says, "Bartender, can I get a drink?" The bartender turns around and says, "Hey, I'm sorry to tell you this, buddy, but we don't serve pieces of string in this establishment. You're going to have to leave." The piece of string was devastated. He went outside and he walked around the side of the building. He went in the alley. He tied himself in knots and he frayed his ends and just tried to make himself totally unrecognizable. And he walked back in the bar. In all the confidence in the world, he sat down at the bar. Bartender turned around and said, "Hey, can I get you something to drink?" Piece of string said, "Yeah, I'll take a beer." He goes, "Hey, wait a minute. Aren't you that piece of string that was just in here a couple of minutes ago?" And the piece of string said, "No, I'm afraid not." And you know it. It's the Roller Health of Rural Vintage Baseball Podcast. We talk vintage baseball players from coast to coast, border to border. It's what we've done for 184 episodes. That's not what we've done for 194 episodes. We've done some other stuff, but mostly, I'd say mostly we've done vintage baseball players. I am joined by my co-host, my muse, my life partner.
Your life partner.
None of that's true in the reality sense of the words, but he's my dear friend all the way from the Devil's Anus, Columbus, Ohio. It's Rudy Frias, the Swamp Box. Rudy, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. That was a top-notch joke, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for starting off with that.
Absolutely. Rudy, you know how I always make fun of Columbus, Ohio as a place where when something bad, it always happens first in Columbus. That's what I mean by the Devil's Anus.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny that you've never come back at me at the fact that I live in Saginaw, Michigan, which is in the top 10 of worst cities to live in every list that's ever made to mankind. I appreciate that.
Well, every time I've been to Saginaw, I've had an enjoyable experience, and some of the best people I've ever met are from Saginaw. So,
Yeah. The Saginaw Ogles have a great field, don't they? It's right on the river. And I don't think they can play there anymore, but you could see some fantastic vintage baseball going on between meth deals and the picnic table in the outfield. It was amazing. We have a great episode tonight, Illinois centered episode, and we're going to start it off with the Champaign. I don't know if that's right. It could. We're going to ask them, but we're going to go with what I know, which isn't much. The Champaign Clippers of Illinois. And Rudy, please introduce our guests.
ladies and gentlemen, I feel as excited as y'all because I'm getting to meet these individuals for the first time as well. Joining us, we have Jed Willard and Doug Burgett from the Champaign Clippers. Gentlemen, welcome to the Roll Out the Barrel Show. How are you doing this evening?
Doing well.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. We're always excited to hear about new clubs that have formed that are going to go through their inaugural season, because we're going to get a lot of information out of you, because you had to start somewhere. You had to see this somewhere. You had to be involved somehow. You had to go through a long process to get to where you're going to be. May 6th. I'm not counting that practice everybody play game beforehand. That's not official. That's just for fun. May 6th is your first official match against the Vermilion Vols, Danville, Illinois. A lot has gone into the process to get to this point. So, gentlemen, which one of you is the captain of the club?
Ooh, both.
Yes.
Co-captains.
Yes.
That always works out. So there's never a hassle with that.
I mean,
well, in vintage baseball works out good, but
I mean, think of the Akron Blackstockings. I believe they're up to eight or nine captains at this point.
No, they lost one. They're down to 7. One just went down to being a player. Too much. But all right. Well, let's start off with Doug then. And then we'll just go back and forth on the questions here. Doug, how does this idea in its very infancy get made?
Yeah, I think for us it's taken a long time. I first saw vintage baseball. I was actually in Michigan on vacation in Saugatuck, Michigan, and we went over to Douglas and saw the Douglas Dutchers play. And this was in 2008, summer of 2008, and I had no idea what vintage baseball was, but I was captivated immediately by just the visual of all of these retro players playing. They actually played on Baseball Diamond. I I didn't know anything about vintage baseball at the time, so it was Douglas, Michigan, real small town. My wife and I are just walking around, looking at shops and things, and this baseball game's going on, and I'm staring at it, wondering what it is. And the way I work is I then go back and start looking things up to try to figure out what this was, and so then I discover vintage baseball and the Douglas Dutchers, and that this is a thing. There's a vintage baseball association, and I start looking up teams around the area, and wanting to play, and was just surprised that maybe disappointed that there just wasn't a team in the Champaign-Urbana area, since I've lived in Champaign-Urbana most of my life, and I thought, this is a community that would be great to have a vintage baseball team. So yeah, that's just kind of how it started for me. Jed, I met Jed through work, and we always kind of geeked out on baseball, and I started talking to him about this, and I think we would have started a team at the time. I mean, I started to get some equipment and just had this concept in my head. But we were both at different stages of starting families, and it kind of got put to the back burner for many years. And then we came back around to it, and played a couple games, with some other teams, and just kind of fell in love with it and thought, let's bring this to Champaign-Urbana, and yeah, just start a team. So that's kind of the history of it.
Would you say your roster is made up mostly of new talent, or would you say that you're borrowing players from other clubs?
Well, we are not trying to borrow players from any other clubs. There's some people who have, I think, played on neighboring teams that may help us out. We don't know really. They've kind of played some of our pickup games last fall, and I don't think that they're stepping away from their other teams by any means, but they might come and help us out. We've kind of formed a close partnership with the Vermilion Voles, and since they have a lot of players from the Champaign-Urbana area, if we don't have very many games in our first season, we might help them out. If they need some players, they might help us out if they have, if we have a game and they're not playing. But no, most of our players are new players.
Jed, let me ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Question number one: is it okay if we refer to it as the Champaign Clippers? Champaign.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Because
fun
if you-
names for this area in the local vernacular, but yeah, Champagne would be the correct way to pronounce it.
No, Champagne. So when you win something major for the first time and you have a glass of, you're not having a glass of champagne, you're having a glass of champagne. Second question, Jed, so you get this idea of vintage baseball. What are your very initial thoughts of the vintage game, and how have they evolved to where you are right now?
So for me personally, I had played baseball all growing up, and even did the rec softball league thing after the fact. And so I'd been in that scene and kind of knew what that was. It could be really highly competitive and cutthroat and things like that. And there's a lot of good about it too, but going and seeing vintage games and playing, actually getting to play in them like right out of the gate, you know, kind of getting pulled into a game was really fun and just showed how low of a barrier of entry there was to it. And so that, like right out of the gate, just how welcoming it was. It wasn't this thing where like, oh no, you got to be a part of our team, you know, like officially to get in here. It's like most clubs seem to be really open to getting people out there, kind of getting, you know, getting you hooked on it, so to speak. And that was absolutely how it was for me, was just getting out there and playing again after, you know, some years of not playing, because I've been coaching, you know, my kids and other stuff like that. And so it's kind of getting back out there to play and seeing like, okay, like everyone plays to their abilities, right? Like some people are really still really good. Like I'm actually quite amazing, some of them. And then there's others that maybe aren't quite as good, but like they still play as hard as they can. And no one's, you know, riding somebody because they can't make a play or whatever. They're just all cheering each other on. And I mean, just that sense of like everyone doing the best they can and just loving the game. So for me, it's like understanding how open it was for everyone and just how fun and kind of relaxed it was. And I'm a history guy, so I love the history part of it too, which just all ties in for me. So whenever I explain it to new people that I'm trying to get out, I'm like, it's kind of like a cross between like, you know, almost like backyard baseball when you were a kid, you know, like there's this almost like this element. That's what it reminds me almost more of than the modern game, is what I tell people. It's kind of like when you were in the backyard with your friends, you know, you might catch a ball off the building and it's an out or something, or, you know, we got the bound out in the vintage game. And so there's a lot of fun quirks to it. And it's just kind of reminds me of that. But that's kind of my evolution with it, coming from like this more structured background for a long number of years, seeing kind of the more casual, friendly, open environment with vintage ball.
That's awesome.
Rudy and I are going to pelt you with advice right now. Here's the first bit of advice. Vintage baseball players love vintage baseball from directly after the game until Friday night. Rudy, go ahead.
Hydrate. Make sure you have proper hydration, because it'll sneak up on you. I want to talk about like what's the uniform looking like, because hydrate like
I'm not done with advice, Rudy. Rudy, what are you doing? You're ruining it.
No, I thought we were peppering advice throughout the interview.
No, absolutely not. We will talk about uniforms in a second. Next piece of advice. When these guys go out there and start doing softball stuffs, you got to nip that in the bud, and you have to do it immediately or it ain't ever going away. Okay? I'll fight you on everything. We don't want to see logos. We don't want to see high fives. Have you talked to your guys about this stuff, by the way?
Yeah, fortunately for us, like I've played softball in the past many years, it's been many years ago now, but like most of our players, I mean, where it's not like we've taken a softball team and brought it into vintage ball. So no, well, I don't have honestly very much, if any, worry about that. And we've been very upfront about that, you know, with anybody that comes in, it's like, this is very relaxed, you know, I mean, that's like what I said too. I'm like, the relaxed part of it is the draw, right? Like if you want to go play hyper competitive and do the softball thing, go play in the softball league, really. But yeah, so now we're very aware that that's a thing, and to address it as such kind of out of the gate. So, but our core team isn't, you know, it's not like a softball team coming into vintage ball. So,
and they, you know, the pickup games that we had at the end of last year, because we started at, you know, in the off season to kind of get this going, and we had a couple of pickup games in the fall last year, and those were just opportunities to get people acclimated to the little rules of the game and things like that. So we had good turnouts for those, and that's what we're going to use our pickup game for this year, is to get everybody out there and get them acclimated. But it'll be a learning process throughout the first season for sure.
All right, Rudy, you're a captain of a vintage baseball club. Give them another piece of advice to how to rein in their players, and then you can talk to them about their uniforms.
I'm not the best person to give advice, because
talk to them about the white shoes, would you?
Oh my gosh. Look, y'all, if you have 8 guys show up and they're in black shoes, and then one of them shows up and heaven forbid there's a logo on his shoes, I would recommend you let the individual play. But just so Bear, I don't know if you gentlemen know this. I have been a pariah in the community for wearing white cleats. I started it a few years ago. It was an act of kindness. I had a spare set of cleats that I gave away, and the only cleats I had left were all white. They were all white. You can't see a logo. And
Listen. You're telling the story right, but you're really not telling it with the right emotion. Rudy Frias gave his cleats to somebody so they could play, and he wore white cleats that day. And there was quite an uproar about it. Well, you gentlemen should know it's historically accurate. They actually had white shoes back then. So it's in many pictures. So he's doing nothing wrong. However, because it causes such an uproar, Rudy just likes to throw on the white cleats now once in a while, just
pretty much,
just to get people as a reminder.
Just pretty much, it's okay. Shoes don't make the man, guys. That's the moral of the story.
Yes, it's true. It's the uniform that makes the man. So please tell Rudy about your uniforms.
You're such a pro. You're such a pro.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do with uniforms is keep them, we have kind of a tiered approach. So we give some guidance if you're looking to come out and spend zero money and just want to throw something together. We have, if you want to spend maybe $25, here's what you can do. If you want to go full in, here's what you can do. So we try to document this, on our website and point people there and just say, hey, look, do what's comfortable. And that's just, to get things off the ground this first season, see what we got. And we'll probably always do that to some degree because we never want to have it be inaccessible for people, just starting. I think that's one of the main things that, somebody doesn't want to come on and have to, and maybe they can't, spend a lot of money on a uniform right out of the gate. Uniforms are some of those uniforms are so cool looking, and we'd like to evolve ours, a little bit, but we're starting out pretty simple, and we just have some navy blue pants and kind of a gray buttoned up flannel shirt, and we have a little navy tie that we wear, and Jed's actually wearing the navy hat that we have. So
I love that.
It's a real simple uniform. We picture, just a bunch of folks in the Midwest throwing this thing on in the late 1850s and going out to a field. So that's where we're starting.
That is a fantastic approach. I mean, I can relate 100% because honestly, for a while there, half of my team, they were dressed based off uniforms from 10 years ago that my family had worn, my brothers and my father, our old shirts. We have a shirt that is almost 20 years old in our collection. You want to make it accessible and inclusive as soon as possible, and then you build that interest. And then after you get that investment, I love what you guys are doing. This is such a smart idea that, then you start being like, all right, hey, maybe we do as a club want to look into new uniforms. I mean, I totally get that. That's such a great idea. Was there any research done as far as was this the concept of your uniform, the look of it, is it based off of anything, or is this just coming straight from you?
Yeah, we looked at a lot of pictures of teams at that time, read a lot of material about knickers and when they started to really come into play. And, again, I mean, Jed mentioned it, that we're both into baseball history and geek out on that. So, looking back and reading books on early baseball, that's kind of our jam. And so yeah, we did a lot of research, and Jed can talk more about this because he kind of initiated, but just to find the name of the team and find local baseball stuff. But it was really hard. we didn't find any early pictures. I'm kind of looking forward to reading Bob's book that you're going to talk to later. And Jed's already started it, but yeah, so Jed's taken some photos in there and sent them to me, because that's basically what we do. It's just like, take photos in books and pass them on to one another. And, we want to be historically accurate, but the thing, like I said, about just picturing some Midwest folks going out to a field, the beauty of it is when Jed and I have put this uniform on and gone out, Jed has mentioned, a couple of times that it's just regular clothes, so unlike a fancy, baseball uniform with knickers and baseball socks and everything, that you can wear this out if you wanted to, like on a Friday night when you're really wanting to go out and look spiffy.
Yeah.
But it's just regular clothes. And I think that's the beauty of it, is it works for both scenarios,
Nice.
If you guys are looking for any information about the Champaign Clippers, go to www.champaignClippers.org. That's CHAMPAIGN. That spells champagne, not the right way, not the way I'm saying it, but and then CLIPPERS.org. You can find out everything. They're apparently on every social media platform that exists, so you can go check it out. I do believe there's a picture of you two gents in the uniforms. Am I correct on that? I saw that somewhere.
Yes, on Instagram. Yeah. And Facebook.
Damn, I'm good.
You are.
And so you can go see them. Everybody 4 points all season if you call them the Champaign Clippers. We appreciate you guys coming in and spending a little time with us. Hope your season goes well. Hope we see you out there somewhere somehow. We don't see a lot of the Illinois guys, but that doesn't mean we can't in the future. I do see on your schedule on July 15th, you are playing the Rock Springs Ground Squirrels, home team of our next interview of Robert Sampson. So Robert says he's the slowest man in vintage baseball. Can either one of you
They're both nodding. They're both nodding. Yes. Did you see that?
So there was actually a race, this last fall that is on record, I believe, on social media. So Bob is speaking the truth, as he often, as he almost always does, and he's I think he's accurate in that statement. So there's a really funny video out there. I think it might be on the Vols, Vermilion Vols social media about Bob's race. So yeah, we love Bob. Actually, Bob's been a great help to us getting started, because we did some research into our club name, which ties to the Champaign area in the 1886 year when they officially started. And as Bob will, I'm sure, talk to you guys about how difficult it was to find history prior to that, until baseball became like a regular thing in the almost a daily occurrence in the paper in the 1870s. But Bob, really excited, and Bob's a great guy. So I'm sure he'll give you a fantastic bit of information on Illinois clubs.
That's amazing.
All right. Thank you guys for stopping by. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
You guys are great.
Yeah. Take it easy. I look forward to hearing an update next this season on how things are going. So best of luck, guys.
Yeah, we'd love to come back on and give you an update of how it actually turns out.
All right, book it. We'll talk to you in November.
All right, sounds good.
See you guys.
Right.
Take care.
Take care. Rudy, you know what time it is right now?
What time is it?
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
It's time for a roller out the barrel news break.
This is your Roller Out the Barrel news break for Sunday, June 17, 1866. I'm Jonathan McLean. Dateline, New York. Get on the phone to Harry in New York because we have a lot of games to unpack today. The Unions of Morrisania led off with a nail-biter win against the Eureka Baseball Club of New Jersey. season's champions had their hands full as the Eureka's struck and fielded well by skunking the Unions in the bottom of the fourth and then scoring 8 in the fifth to take a 15-7 lead. But thanks to 10 runs in the seventh, just after whitewashing the New Jersey club, the score stood 22-19 in favor of the Unions going into the ninth. The Eurekas put up 7, but the Morrisania bunch would score 6 and take the win in a 3-hour, 25-minute affair by a score of 28-26. In another New York versus New Jersey scuffle, the Irvingtons gave a very handsome whipping to the Brooklyn Atlantics in a 4-hour slugfest by a final score of 23-17. In a match of the second nines, the Mutual second nine beat the Excelsior second nine 50-12 in a game that lasted just under 2.5 hours. Every player for the Mutuals scored at least 4 runs. Mr. Reed, the Mutuals catcher, had a clean game by registering no outs and scoring 8 runs himself. In other news, a Mr. Charles Dunlop has been arrested in Ohio for poisoning horses and then offering to cure them as a horse doctor. For those horses, Mr. Dunlop was clearly the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm Jonathan McLean, and this has been your Roller at the Barrel News Break.
That made me very happy.
It's the best thing that we do, and we don't do it.
Yeah.
I could just listen to a show full of those. Hey, Rudy, is our guest with us yet?
Our guest is here, and we're letting him in now.
Let's bring him in. Our guest is a member of the Rock Springs Ground Squirrels, but he's so much more than that. Joining us is Bob Sampson.
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In a row.
Wee! Bob Sampson, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm having, I don't know if you can see me or not.
Not yet.
I see. No, keep working on that, but we can talk while you're working on it.
Okay. Oh,
We had Kevin Mensch on as an interview last year, and we were all excited because we had former major league player Kevin Mensch on, and he could never get his video to work. It's almost like we didn't have proof he was here.
Yeah.
We just had the audio.
There's no real proof Kevin Mensch ever spoke to us.
oh,
Oh, Bob, look at all those books in the background. I feel dumber already.
yeah,
Have you
well,
read every single one of those books?
oh, yeah. That's about a third of my original library. I had to get rid of the rest when we moved. So, I'm a trained historian. So that's like carpenters have saws and hammers, and we have too many books.
You say you're a trained historian. You're not trained at being a historian. You've just taken in so much information. You're like a professional historian.
Well, yeah, I got to run through the traces in grad school, so they sort of like a boot camp for historians. But thank you.
So we brought Robert Sampson on because I talked to him back in his late fall or winter time. He's got a new book coming out. It's actually out right now, but not on Amazon. You're pre-ordering on Amazon right now.
Oh,
That's right.
Oh, well, you can get it beginning on March 30th through April 1st. You can get it for half price through the U of I Press. But you got to know I should have looked this up. The code. I'll try and find that here at some point.
Well, they don't run the world, Bob. Amazon does. So people will just go to Amazon and pay full price. Ballist, Deadbeats, and Muffins. This is a story of the history of Illinois baseball from the beginning. I did want to mention, Robert, before we get into that book, and like I said, we talked earlier and we scheduled this interview to happen about this time because the book's coming out. We didn't want to go too early with it and have everyone lose their thoughts. But there's also another book of yours on Amazon from 2003, and that's the John L. O'Sullivan and His Times book. And I just want you to know there's only one copy left. So can you do something? Can you get more copies on there? It's like $44. There's one copy left.
Holy
We need to
cow.
replenish.
Oh, it's gone up, and I'm not getting any royalties from it. So I don't know who got the money from all those books. But yeah, that's interesting to know. They're down to one book. You could probably get it from a used place, but was that the $44 price?
Yeah, it's not a paperback. I think it was a hardcover.
They're all
sure.
hardcover.
But when there's only one left on Amazon, is that the equivalent of like going to a garage sale and finding your own book on a table and you're like, oh man, come on.
Yeah.
So Ballist, Deadbeats, and Muffins in the Illinois area. Robert, let's give everybody a little bit of background about you. You fill in the gaps here. You were a newspaper reporter for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
What was your beat?
I began like a lot of people as a sports writer, but I only lasted about 8 or 9 months in that, and I became a city hall reporter. Then I went to a bigger paper and covered various things, including politics. And I was a columnist. The last 7 or 8 years, I was at that newspaper in Decatur, Illinois.
So you left newspaper reporting many, many years before newspapers died.
I had good time. Good time.
You were 20 years. You were 20 years before it really started to die, wouldn't you say? The newspaper starts.
Yeah. It and you know it was amazing because it happened so fast. I don't think anybody saw it coming. If you would ask somebody, even like in 1992 or 93 or 94, is within 10 years, are your jobs going to start to disappear? They would have laughed at you. They were an institution, and it's sort of sad. Well, it is sad in many, many ways. But I was fortunate to get out when I did.
Yeah, back then you had to be creative with your words, and nowadays you have to be creative with your TikTok videos.
Yes,
it's the same thing. Then in 83 to 85, you become involved with Richard Durbin, who was at the time a congressman. How do you make that transition? What was that like?
It was it's one of those things that you have a certain idea of it or what it's going to be like, and then you start doing it and discover, holy cow, this is a whole different world. It's not like on TV, things like the West Wing where they all seem to be discussing, big high-powered issues all the time, and they were in these nice offices and running around and all that. It's hard work, maybe the hardest work I ever did in my life in terms of just every day. Because those were actually 12, 13, 14-hour days, 5 days a week. And it was great working for him. He was on the rise at that point. But I think in retrospect, I had probably gone there too late, too old. We had two little kids, and it's very difficult to have a family life. And so when I got the opportunity to come back to Illinois, I took it, and there was I still have very good relations with him, and don't see him much anymore, obviously. But it was a good experience. It's one of those things that I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I eventually did something else. It certainly gives one a whole different idea and appreciation for the political system and how it can work when it works.
I don't believe you that it's worked ever. 85 through 09, you have here that you were a writer, but also you were a public information specialist. Is that just not double wording for trained historian?
Well, I wasn't a trained yet. I was basically what we might call public relations. But when you're in a university where you're not public relations, you're public information. So I wrote articles for the College of Agriculture and the Cooperative Extension Service, and it was a good job. I enjoyed it. I had good colleagues. I learned a little bit about agriculture, Not enough to trade in stocks or commodities or anything, but a little bit. And the great thing about that is at the University of Illinois at the time, and I think it's still true, if you're a full-time employee, you can go to graduate school for free. Now you can't, it's like a certain number, you only have a certain number of courses each semester. And so I did that sort of out of self-defense, because in a university, the entry level is not a bachelor's degree. The entry level is a master's. I didn't have a master's. So I got that, and then I kept on going. And plus I really got to work with some great people in the Department of History, some real giants at the time. And so anything good I do, they get credit for it. And anything bad I do, it's my own fault. So
that's the way it should be, I guess.
Yes.
You you did the John L. O'Sullivan book in 2003.
Yes.
Are you getting an echo off me talking, Rudy? Rudy, am I echoing?
Yep.
That's not cool. I was going to go on with it. And tell everybody just a quick a summary of what that book was about in 2003.
Well, that was my dissertation. And John L. O'Sullivan, if he's known at all, and he's probably not known by hardly anybody, maybe at some point, in school, you came across the term manifest destiny,
Yep.
that was back in the 1840s. And he was the fellow who popularized that. He was a newspaper editor, a magazine editor, was a friend, probably one of Nathaniel Hawthorne's closest friends. A lot of interesting things. He also came within a couple of votes. He served 2 terms in the New York State Legislature. He came within about 2 or 3 votes of abolishing capital punishment in New York in the 1840s. So he had a lot of interests, and so had essentially sort of a tragic life, because as somebody once said of him, he had a positive genius for lost causes. If he saw a lost cause walking down the street, he'd run up to it and jump on top and ride it over the cliff. So he ends up as a Confederate agent in Europe during the Civil War. He has great talent for picking the losing side, and then sort of dropped from sight, but lived until 1895 in obscurity.
From the years 90 until 2020, it says here that you've traveled around to various colleges and universities, teaching Irish history, labor history, English history, and baseball history. I want you to tell me one thing that encompassed all 4 of those, that you could teach in every one of those classes, and it was still relevant.
That's easy, the Irish class, because I had a whole lecture on early baseball, say turn of the century baseball, 1890s, early teens, because there's actually a book written. It's called The Emerald Age in Baseball or something like that, which the Irish were sort of the dominant ethnic group in baseball. And of course, if you talk about Ireland, you got to talk about England, because England's the oppressor. And then the Irish are a big factor in U.S. history, the Irish immigrants. And so, that's, if I had to say, okay, what one course sort of wrapped everything up. And then of course I should add labor. They're part, the early labor leaders are Irish. In fact, at one time you could throw a rock at the names of any Union president, and it would be an Irish name in the early 20th century. So that was that was probably when I put it all together in that class.
Of all the things that I came across about you, this next piece is the most interesting, which probably isn't the greatest thing to say when you're trying to get a book out there. But you published an article called Fields of Battle, the problem of baseball playing space in the post-Civil War. I want to know everything about this. I want you to tell me about this article, and I want you to send me this article. I want to read this entire piece, but please give us a summary of that article.
Okay. Well, it was a big problem, a major problem, and some teams were literally thrown out of town. In fact, I'm sitting here in the basement in Bloomington, Illinois, and Bloomington in that period 1865 to 1869 or so, was probably one of the top 3 teams in Illinois. And city council passed a resolution one night saying we prohibit the playing of baseball within the city limits. So they were tossed out. They had to go across the city limits to have a field. That was the most radical example of it. But, you know, in general, we have to, this is sort of hard for us to comprehend today, because in a place like Columbus or your town up in Michigan, you can go out the door and probably, you know, walk a few blocks and see a public park, right? They're all over the place. There wasn't any public parks in the 1860s in Illinois.
Sure.
The closest thing to a public park would be the courthouse square, where they had to put fences up to keep the cattle and hogs and horses out of, and that was a park. So there was a real problem for many of these teams finding places to play, and some of them were not good. There's one in Rockford, which somebody later described as having more roughs and traps than a respectable golf course. I mean, they had creeks that ran through them. People could fall into the creeks chasing a ball. There were trees everywhere. So that was the second article I wrote before the book addressing that, because that was a big problem all over the place. And interestingly enough, though, just again, I'm in Bloomington. You go about 70 miles to the southwest. You have Springfield, Illinois, in which the whole power structure of that town got behind baseball. And every time you turned around, some rich guy was donating land for kids to play, these young men to play baseball on. And the best example was something that sounds more like the late 19th, early 20th century, when they're building places like Forbes Field in Pittsburgh or Scheib Field in Philadelphia. There, it was at the end of a transportation line, a horse railway. And so these guys, these power barons in Springfield, one's Republican, one's a Democrat, they own this horse railway, which is sort of like a trolley that is pulled by horses. So that at the end of the line, they've got this big area, which is, got meadows and stuff. Well, how can we increase ridership on our line and make some use of this stuff? Maybe even charge people to get into it. And so they create Railway Park. And that becomes the major baseball field in Springfield in the mid 1860s. So you have sort of a combination there of political power, of capitalism, and baseball. Not the last time you're going to see that combination in America. Yeah,
absolutely.
Email me your address and I'll get one to you.
Absolutely, I'm going to do that. No doubt about that. That I found that to be fascinating. It's something that I think when you're in the vintage community and you think about what vintage baseball actually looked like back in the 19th century, these are things that cross your head, but you don't really think about them. And you don't really hear stories about the issues of where to play. We just play, and we know they played, and we just move on.
Yeah.
It almost makes you feel like clubs that are playing with on certain fields with certain impediments, like say trees, or I have played on a field with a creek running through the outfield before, are almost more historically accurate. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that would have been historically accurate. I mean, nothing that they played on in that period in Illinois, at least from 1865 to 70, we would not recognize it necessarily as a baseball field. It certainly didn't have a skinned infield, didn't have a grass, it's just all, and there might be holes in it. It might be, uneven. There might be trees, creeks. And I think we probably played on that same field, Rudy. There's two of them in Indiana, Grinder Field, which has then there was one up in northwestern Indiana that the left fielder had to go across a bridge to play left field. Because there was this, and there was some sort of a shed on the right field line, and then the field sloped down So the right fielder couldn't see a ball coming down the right field line. So somebody had to yell, oh, there's a ball coming your way. That was probably a very accurate field, but we didn't know it. We just, we had a long afternoon there.
Very true.
There's a lot of argument about sliding in the 19th century, and it's always a hot topic, and we don't need to get into it, but I want to throw this at you. These guys are just looking for a place to play. They find a place they can play, and they look at it and they go, okay, but no sliding. Or, because of what the field was, is it possible that sliding was a thing, but the field conditions actually determined whether they were doing it?
That might have been a factor. I can give you a real quick Cliff's Notes version of this. Because in my research in Illinois, and I must have looked at hundreds of thousands of game stories, sliding was never mentioned in any game story. There was not a statistical category, but one can speculate that it was probably happening because one reason we have these double-digit scores. But about 50 years later, in the recollections, I found 2 recollections of old ball players, and they talked about it because in this context that the catcher, as they do in vintage baseball, you play way back. And so some of the good teams started moving the catcher up, which would have been a real dangerous thing in those days, simply because it would give them more of an advantage. But I don't 2 or 3 teams in Illinois that did that. Left a record. So they may have, some games they may have been sliding, some games they may not have, and it may be one of those unanswered mysteries that we're never going to figure out. That's the old game. The whole modern game, let's don't go down that road.
Yeah.
You are a member of the Rock Springs Ground Squirrels. You told me that you are the slowest man in vintage baseball. We confirmed that with the Champaign Clippers gentlemen that were on just before you.
Yes.
They did concur that you are the slowest man in vintage baseball. They said there's an actual video of a race. Is this true?
Yes. Yeah. Last fall in Danville. I'm not going to tell you I'm slow, but I played at Muffin Meadow in July of 1992, and I'm still trying to get to first base.
You just triggered a memory, a very visceral memory for me. I was at that game.
Oh, okay. Have they called me safer out yet?
They're still waiting.
Okay, I was going as fast as I could. No, I am. No, I think I'm probably starting to get some competition, but I'm close to becoming a stationary object anyway, so it's all moot at this point.
Yes, you refer to yourself as one step away from stationary.
Yes.
So there's what is your I don't have it here in front of me. What is your vintage baseball nickname?
I was afraid you were going to ask that. Yeah, Droopy Drawers.
Some names. You just know there's a story.
Yeah, yes, and I prefer not to.
With that story, Bob.
I feel like a moniker such as that. There is no story that needs to be told.
That's a good. I like that. I'm going to stick to that from now on.
When you went and played against the Muffins in your first match, I believe that was 1992. You were on a club from Decatur. Did you notice how they all had belts? They all had belts.
Yeah. Oh, we were impressed. We thought, what the heck is this thing? And these guys come out in these gray pants and red, and they got that little tie on, and we said, oh, this is gonna be easy. We're gonna win this game. And I don't know, 9 innings later, we had one win, and they had 28 or 35 or something like that. And that was a great experience. I love that program there. I miss Muffin Meadow.
So sometimes when I come across a baseball historian like yourself, I always ask them what came first, the history or the baseball. In your case, it's obvious the history came first. How did you come across the actual reincarnation of vintage baseball?
Again, the Cliff Notes version, I had heard about, even around 1992, I'd heard about a fellow indicator who had gone through the old newspapers from that time, 1867, and he had a paragraph he copied out about the grand tournament of the Western States, which there were more words in the title than there were the actual teams that actually showed up to play in it, but that's another story. Anyway, the whole thing almost fell apart because of several different arguments that occurred during the thing. So I'm thinking, well, boy, what was going on there? So I said, well, this might make an interesting or something. I'll just poke around there. So I ended up doing it on those, on the team from Decatur, team from Bloomington, team from Chicago, team from Pana. Those were the main ones involved in it, and that was called this birth pangs of early baseball in Illinois. The spirit of discord arose. So I got that done, and then I'm thinking, okay, do I want to? Maybe I could go on with this somehow. And then it hit me. Well, you can't do it with these 4 or 5 teams, because you're talking about a state, it's one of the longest states in the country, goes from the Mississippi River all the way up to, Lake Michigan and Wisconsin. So you got to look at them all. That's when I probably should have said, wait a minute, maybe it's a good time to work on my speed on the base pads or something and devote it to that. But I didn't. I went ahead. So that meant very quickly, you got to look at you have to find whatever evidence you can of every team that played in Illinois. And there turned out to be there was over 1,000 of them. Most of them were outside of Decatur. And how you do that, maybe you remember from being in a library, they had these big old things. They're called microfilm readers.
Oh, yeah.
And we put that newspaper, and for again, short story, I was lucky I had easy access to that, but it took about almost 10 years to go through that stuff. But the thing about doing history is you answer one question and in the process create 5 more. Every time I answered a question, well, okay, that's what happened in Bloomington, but what was it like in Rockford, or what was it like in Quincy or Cairo or somewhere else, different parts of the state. And then finally, after I got through those newspapers, I had a fairly good idea what had happened and why it peaked as like a social phenomena between about 1865 and about 1868. It was like, trying to think of what, you guys are too young, but back in the 1950s, there was something called the hula hoop. The whole country went nuts about hula hoops.
How young do you think we are, for crying out loud? Yeah, the hula hoop, yeah.
Everybody looks young.
It preceded the pet rock. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was, everybody. So it was something everybody was talking about. They didn't know much about it, and it was sort of like the latest new thing. And so you had hundreds of people going to these ball games to watch their local team and their uniforms, and that's a whole, that was a whole other thing. And then it sort of started to fade away. Now it never dies out, but that initial public fascination with just the game itself and the pageantry and all that just dissipates. And then bad repute. The adult clubs, these were the guys that were 18 into their early 20s. They die out by the end of the period. They're gone except for Rockford, Forest Cities, which that's Albert Goodwill Spalding. Well, I like to say he's one of those guys that the more you learn about, the more you hate him. You can look that up for yourself. Well, why? Why did these things go away? So as these clips, as these notes start to pile up, and you can't see them, but there's several drawers full of them here. It becomes apparent that a number of problems develop. People are fighting about the rules. There's one case we have a mini riot after a game. 2 teams, and their supporters start duking it out. People start yelling at the umpires, So that was new then. The umpire was a figure of authority, and you were never, players or spectators were never supposed to say anything. Well, all of a sudden now, they're yelling at the umpires and questioning their decision and calling them crooks, and so that initial fascination fades in the light of that. There's also gambling and other problems as well. So that's sort of where I ended up at.
You made reference to how there was many clubs in the Illinois area until it kind of died off. How many clubs would you say are in the Illinois area right now?
Oh, you mean vintage clubs or just regular
vintage clubs that are currently scheduling matches? Do you have an idea of approximately how many?
10. That would be my ballpark. No pun intended. My ballpark figure, 10. At one time, there would have been a few more. The St. Louis teams are sort of in trouble now. A lot of teams out here are because of an aging rosters. One time we had several teams on the eastern side of Mississippi River. There was Weston, Belleville. Belleville's still there, but all the rest of the ones on the east side are gone. And we had, I think, at one time 5 teams in St. Louis. Now we effectively have about 2 in St. Louis proper.
What do you find is the biggest problem for recruiting younger people out there in that area?
They don't have time to play. We're seeing more people who aren't, the 5-day, 40-hour week, for a lot of reasons, sadly, I think, has disappeared. Or people have to work on weekends. And so or they have young families, which, we always had that. I mean, Rudy's from a baseball family. He knows about that. Yeah. But I think now it's just, they can't do it. And the older guys, like me and people younger than me, you transition out after a while. So I think that's and the other thing, and you guys would appreciate this, somebody willing to step up and run the darn thing.
Oh.
At the end of the day, that's probably the biggest factor that, people burn out.
Yes.
And nobody else wants to do it. And so it doesn't get done.
Yeah, that's actually something we're going through in the Midwest right now, Michigan and Ohio. Michigan and Ohio probably has somewhere around 70 teams combined.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But there's usually about 4 or 5 canceled matches a weekend every week. So it's not that great when you hear that number 70. But yeah, we have a hard time with people wanting to take over the reins. People change. Like Rudy's a perfect example right in front of us, captain of the Columbus Capitals.
Yeah.
His life is different now than it was when he took over the reins as the captain of the Columbus Capitals. And children and wives, and not a lot of us know this, but some wives out there like their husbands, and he has one of them.
These baseball players' wife likes her husband. Oh,
I have no idea what she
everybody on
sees
the
in me.
team has everybody has new involvement. Kids schedule when they get to a certain age of activities and everything is just crazy, and the parents will do it, and so you run out of time there. Selling it to a younger generation can be difficult because they're sissies. Whoa, what?
No, we heard you.
Because they don't get it, I think is what I should have said. And it's hard to find, like in the 1880s games on the East Coast, finding somebody to play catcher in those games, well, that's hard.
Yeah.
And
it'd be hard for me. Well, another thing we have too is that and maybe you've noticed this in Ohio or in Michigan, we really sort of, when we were getting younger players, we sort of had to keep an eye on it because, they come in off the softball fields and they think they're Pete Rose. You can't do that. I mean, I've seen, I know one team, I won't mention, that actually threw a couple people off because they couldn't housebreak them. They were but So if you have those standards, you just can't take everybody, and or if you do, and I could mention some teams that I've known over the years that had about 8 or 9 of them, and nobody wants to play them. It's not worth it.
Well, here's the difference in the mentality of 19th century and today. In the 19th century baseball, you could say, hey, we need you to fix your pants or tuck your shirt in or whatever. And the guy would go, okay. If you say that to somebody nowadays, now you've got an enemy and they don't like you and they want to go to a different vintage baseball team, or they're going to start their own vintage baseball team, or that it just we just have a different mentality nowadays, and that comes with it. But Robert, I have talked to you about a lot of different things, but let's get to what we're really here for. It's the book about to be released on Amazon. He said you can go get it somewhere else for half price, but that's not what we do, society. You can pre-order it on Amazon. It's Ballist, Deadbeats and Muffins, and there's more to that title. I don't know. I'm gonna have Bob tell you. Tell us the correct title of the book and tell us what it's about.
Okay, well, Ballist is what they called baseball players. And there's lots of references in the newspapers at the time. Centralia's Ballist. They're going to go over to Ashley and play the Deadbeats. And the Deadbeats was that I only found one team with the name of Deadbeat, and that was Ashley, a little place in the middle of nowhere. It's barely there now. And at that time, Deadbeat was sort of the slang for somebody who was unreliable. Sort of you couldn't depend on them. It's also slang for thief. Maybe they were, yeah. And then Muffins, we those around vintage baseball. They had these muffin games, and that's what they would purposely put together teams of overweight people, people who were too thin, people who were lawyers or doctors and never played the game before, and the people loved to turn out for those. They just loved that stuff because these guys were obviously just playing for fun. They had no skill whatsoever. They would have special rules, like they would one case there'd be a bucket of beer at each base so they could rest between bases, and if somebody weighed over 200 pounds, they got extra time to run to and they would publish these rules. So that was the three things entitled. And we have a lot in the book about the Muffins game. Now, Peter, I should give credit. Peter Morris, who's one of your Michigan compatriots, brilliant writer, brilliant historian. He's the guy that sort of rescued those games in his book, But Didn't We Have Fun, about that whole period of transition from the amateur game to the professional game. So that's where the title comes from.
What a gentleman, pubbing somebody else's book. The Peter Morris book is pretty much the title we give to all new vintage baseball players of read this book.
Yeah.
And, it's
I would say
kind of
that, yeah, if I had dictatorial powers and I was the commissioner of the Vintage Baseball Association, I would require every team to have a copy and maybe get extra copies and make their players read one of these two books. Peter Morris's But Didn't We Have Fun, and then Jim Tootle's Vintage Baseball. You got everything you need to know, and if you want to go beyond that, you can go beyond that. But I mean, those two books, especially Morris, is just so good, and Tootle's very good too. He has a different approach. He's talking about modern vintage baseball. You can get by with those and go a long, long way.
You brought up something about a bucket of beer at every base. Now, here's the thing. I was the organizer of a vintage baseball festival in Michigan. What did we call it, Rudy? It was
come on now. Don't now you're selling yourself short, buddy. It was one of the premier vintage baseball events and festivals in the Midwest. It was the Michigan Vintage Baseball Festival. And with the second that he said a bucket of beer at every base, did you see my face light up? Light up.
So you're selling me short, Rudy. It was the largest vintage baseball festival that's ever happened 2 years running. Thank you. Ever in the entire United States. But who's keeping score? Yeah, so we would do, Bob, on Friday night, we would do a captain's match, and it was just a match of all the captains.
Yeah.
We would make up 2 teams, and it was fun for about 4 innings, and then the captains turned on the intensity and wanted to beat each other. And the only punishment for the match was you had to be an umpire for a match over the weekend.
Yeah.
And there were, so many games that they had plenty to choose from. Because we had like 35 teams or something like that. 37 was the one year where we were like the biggest thing ever, according to Guinness.
37.
But I did not ever ask them. They
Yeah.
had nothing to do with it. But in talking to Paul Hunkley, I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with Paul Hunkley.
He's a nice guy. Yeah.
He said that he couldn't remember where, but there was a reference to beer at bases. So I had put beer at third base. And if you stopped at third base, you got a beer. And I was able to get away with it because it was historically accurate. Now you're telling me, is there something in your book
Yes.
that I'm going to come across that has beer and bases?
Yes. It was a game between Centralia and Salem, which is Southern Illinois, down south of I-70. And a guy from Centralia wanted to encourage the Centralia players to really beat up on Salem. And so he says, okay, I'm going to have a bucket of beer at third base, and everybody that gets to third base can have a swig of beer. And we know they were doing it because in a recollection, decades later, one of the players said, yeah, we got to third base a lot, except as the game went on, we sort of lost track of a few things. So we know of at least one, we can document one instance where there was a bucket of beer at third base.
Oh,
So I was told if it can be documented once, then people cannot stop me from doing it. Just like the white shoes Rudy wears once in a while, just like sliding, just like a fair foul. Because Rudy's my friend and the co-host of this show, Bob,
okay.
the fair foul.
Okay, no.
The fair foul.
Here we go.
Don't
Don't
tell me
engage.
about the fair foul.
It's a trap.
Yeah, that's another thing that you would, it's interesting. The things that we're desperately interested in today, they didn't give a hoot about in the 18s. So there's no mention of stealing in Illinois again. I'm not talking about the East Coast. That's a whole different story. Illinois, no mentions, and I can't recall anything about a fair foul, what we would call a fair foul hit. I'm sure it happened because it happens by accident in our games. I think, I don't know how it is in Michigan or Ohio. It's sort of been blocked by peer pressure in Illinois. It's considered poor form if you do that on purpose, because there are people, as you guys know, who can do that all day, and you'll never get them out. Watch your point. Well, okay, so you've proven you can do it. Great, go ahead and go to first base. Don't even bother to swing at the ball. But yeah, there's nothing. I now somebody Morris is that I'm aware of, is the only one who's done a detailed study of the state from top to bottom. He had a book on Michigan baseball fever. His first book, Baseball Fever in early Michigan. You have to go through a lot of newspapers, and maybe in Indiana, or maybe in Iowa, or they had a big to do one day about the fair foul thing, but not in Illinois.
Well, here in the Midwest, we like to lick the tears of our victims. So we like to complain about everything here in the Midwest. So yes, you are correct when you say fair foul just happens. It just happens. So you can't say that somebody didn't come along, because they're smart people too in the world. You can't tell me somebody didn't come along and say, oh, I'm just going to do that. And like Rudy, and hit it towards families. And I have no conscience about it. So he gets first base every time.
Now, Big Bat might have done that, but I can't imagine a Prius doing it. Oh, I love Big Bad. I'm just kidding.
I know. I love Big Bet too. Big Bet too.
So we don't want you to give too much of your book away. We're trying to sell books around here, people. It's Ballist, Deadbeats and Muffins. You can pre-order on Amazon. Bob, go ahead and tell everybody again this deal at this website or whatever.
Well, it would be through the U of I Press website, and that's really the fast because they're mailing them out right now. I mean, people have ordered them there, they got it. So go to the University of Illinois Press. They got a big page, and you just do a search under Robert D. Sampson, and it should pop up. Now I have got to find. I don't have it handy. I should have written this thing down, and I can't go to my Facebook now. But well, maybe just a second here. It takes too long. I can get that code.
You can go look for it, Bob. We can fill space. We're trained professionals. Pull up your Facebook. Let's get the right information. When we were interviewing the Champaign Clippers before you came on,
oh yeah,
they actually had a copy of your book and were showing it off in the Zoom. So I believe on July 15th, you're going to see them gentlemen on the field. I would assume they're going to expect some sort of autograph.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice of them. Yeah.
And,
they're a
like,
good bunch of guys, as you know. They're let's see here.
Yeah, we just met them tonight for the first time, and they are definitely against being called the Champaign Clippers, which I have an issue with. Yeah.
You're trying to make it
Champagne.
fancy. I appreciate I'm sure they appreciate the effort. Tiata.
I will find her just in a minute.
Oh.
She sent me this thing a couple of days ago.
It was really easy to find. Literally went to Google, typed in the University of Illinois Press, and went into the search bar, typed Bob Sampson, got it right here. It's all set and ready to go.
Yeah, it's just the
while he's looking for that, Rudy, did you see the pictures released yesterday? Drone footage from the Field of Dreams site where they've begun building.
I did. I did. And then it made me very thankful for having the experience back in 2015, back when it was just only the field. No major league ballpark, nothing else, just the field and the corn. It made me nostalgic for that, and then a little sad.
Yeah, that was the night we took our relationship to the next step.
We were like two ships passing in the cornfield, and then we met.
Got family audience out here, guys.
We became more than just baseball friends.
Yeah, that's right.
And the rest is history. Do you remember how when it went from dusk to nighttime, how you couldn't see the ball and you were taking your own life into your hands because you heard the crack of the bat and you didn't see the ball in your
we didn't anticipate the ball not staying white. And we're like, oh, it was a little, the grass was a little wet, so anytime that it came out to the outfield and then it rolled through the infield, we heard it. We're like, just be ready.
Okay, here's the code.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, when you order it, now this is only good on March 30th, 31st, and April 1st. Just 3 days. But the code is OAH23.
OAH23.
Yeah. So if you order it, well, I guess that would be Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Can't get it before, you can't get it after, but those 3 days you can get it.
So last day of the good deal is April 1st. What a joke. Bob, best April Fool's joke you've ever pulled on somebody.
I have no control over the U of I Press.
Have you ever pulled an April Fool's joke on somebody?
Yeah, but I can't remember. I think pulled something, put something up on Facebook, or said some of my old newspaper columns were April Fool's joke, but they appeared year round. So it didn't make much sense.
So like I said, we don't want to give too much of the book away because we want everybody to go in there. You already gave me my piece about the beer on the bases, so you sold me on the book, and we hope everybody goes and supports this project, and in every project. It's amazing how many interviews we do where there's people that have something like a book, or they've actually done a jazz album, or they've done this, or they've done that. It's amazing how many of these we come across. Obviously, you're well known in the vintage community, Robert, and we appreciate you coming on and talking to us. But I want you to, I'm going to give you this opportunity. I'm going to give you the floor. I want you to sell your book. Sell that book to everybody. Get them to buy it, Bob.
Well, it has nice pictures. We got some nice pictures. You know, that's the amazing thing. Maybe it's different in Ohio or Michigan. You can count the number of images that exist of baseball on one hand. There's an individual player. There's 2 or 3 team pictures, and that's it. You know, I spent a lot of time looking for that. But there are some nice ones, and also some people who are mentioned in the book. We do have pictures of them, including a guy who wrote a very hilarious article about trying to play baseball. His name was Rick Pomeroy. He was a humorist at that time, so people will enjoy it. There's a lot of humor in it. Most of it intentional, some of it unintentional because of my writing. But other than that, you know, I think the thing that will surprise me was the amount of gambling and the trouble the gambling caused. And that was one of the other factors that sort of played into it. Now, I suppose it's probably true in Michigan as well as Ohio and Illinois, that towns have rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, we don't like those people from Boonville, you know, and these certainly you have them in sports, right? High school football, basketball. Well, that was one of the things that started to develop there, because these towns, this time in Illinois, are competing commercially, but they're also competing to get railroads because they're expanding the railroads like crazy throughout the state. And so these baseball teams, there's no team sports. There's nothing that we would call a spectator sport until this point. Hey, we've got this new club. We beat this other town, you know. And one of them, there's a place, Jerseyville, a little place in southwestern Illinois, kept trying to put together these teams and beat their neighbor to the north, a place called Carrollton. No reason you should know that, but they failed 3 times, and finally Carrollton, the editor of the newspaper, had, well, they should know better to expect to beat a team from a high class city when they're from a little country town that nobody knows where it's at, type of thing. And so it became very, very hard, very antagonistic.
Oh.
Another thing that I learned through the book, researching it, which I think will come as a surprise to most people, is the importance of railroads and rivers. And I should have brought it down here. It wouldn't show up too well, but there's a picture of it in the book. If I took these little stick pins and I put them every place there was a team, or all the teams, or most of them are on there, and they track the rail lines and the rivers. And there's big chunks of the state that don't have anything because they don't have any railroads or rivers. And I've only found 1 or 2 teams that actually got in a wagon and went across country to play somebody else. And they actually then complained about how, you know, we were in this, imagine being in a wooden wagon, there's no seats, just sitting on the back of the floor in the middle of the summer, driving, you know, 4 or 5 hours across the prairie and then getting off and playing baseball and then getting back in the wagon and going, there's really no road. So, you know, there's lots of interesting things. And the other thing about it is, though it's about baseball, it's also sort of a social history. You know, what were the times like? What was going on in these towns? You know, one of these towns had a hog stampede. Yeah, when was the last time you heard about a town that had a hog stampede? You had people offering bear meat that was shot locally. I mean, there was bears running around in southern Illinois, hogs and dogs, and cows running around the streets at all hours of the day and night causing trouble, and cats too. So there's these, and to me, that's sort of what makes history interesting, are these little touches that we can sort of reach through that curtain. We can never quite get there, but we can sort of sense off the tip of our fingers the past and what life was like. You know, what it was like to get up in the morning when you got these roosters in everybody's backyard, hawking, and without air conditioning. Imagine, how did they survive? Well, they obviously did. All those things that was part of their daily life, and comes out in these stories or these newspapers. And so you can feel, hopefully, hey, I'm sort of there. I can understand this now when they talk about a hot day, and the effect that has on play. Okay, I've been there. I can, but we get to go back to get in an air-conditioned car or go back to an air-conditioned home. They had to put up with it till the heat wave broke, which might be, weeks or months. So I think that's sort of the scattershot thing. But I think people will enjoy, hopefully, sort of the local color, the local touches of these towns, some of which no longer exist on a map. Places that had teams, there's nothing there. I suppose there's a soybean field or a cornfield or something, but at one time they were thriving communities, and they, like any other thriving community, by God, we got to have a ball team. Let's get one, and they did.
That still happens today. If you have a thriving community, you have to have multiple ball teams from multiple sports. Rudy, do you have anything for Bob before we get him out of here with giving him the old pepper?
No, honest. It's such a treat to get to chat with you. I encourage anybody attending the conference coming up, the VBBA conference, to stop by. Do you know what time when are you presenting? What time?
I think it's around 11 o'clock on Saturday, April Fool's Day.
Fantastic. I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I love that we just spoke to a team, some gentlemen who want to form a new team, and you were that resource for them, so they didn't have to go through hours and hours and days and days and years of microfiche and spending time in the stacks and in museums and libraries. That you're doing such a service to the community. I think it's amazing. So thank you so much.
Well, Rudy, could you do a favor for me?
Yeah.
I think one time I was at Muffin Meadow and I was pitching, and Big Bat hit one of my pitches. And could you see if that thing ever came down? Is it all in the fairgrounds, or is that the state capitol? I would just like to know where that ball finally landed. That's all.
There are still sightings of it to this day. People say they look up and they see it going across the sky.
Bob, you are great. Obviously, if your writing is anything like your communication skills, everybody is in for a treat when they get Ballist, Deadbeats, and Muffins. But don't forget that one copy of John L. O'Sullivan and His Times. That one copy. Only one person can have it. You don't know if you're ever going to see that again.
Maybe I better buy it.
Maybe you should be the one who buys
it. Sold out.
Robert, I'm sure you're way too smart to listen to the episodes of this podcast, but if you ever listen to the end, we do a segment before we get people out called Giving You the Old Pepper, and they're just very quick questions with very quick answers.
I didn't do it.
Okay. Obviously, you're a man that knows his Irish history. Can you tell us an Irish stereotype that is very true and one that is not true at all?
Drinking, very true. High rates of alcoholism in Ireland, and maybe not so much today, but certainly in the past. Fighting over not so true.
Oh, okay. Where is the best place to play vintage baseball currently in Illinois, in your opinion?
Our home field. in Decatur, beautiful throw ball field, because it's sort of like it's close to what you would have seen at the time, just an open field. We don't have the options. We used to talk about maybe we should build a tower out in center field. I think maybe Rudy's been there. I know and it's just, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many fine fields. That's just the one I prefer the most.
What is your next book going to be about?
Tips on base running.
Tips on base running. It's going to be a bestseller.
I don't think at my age there's another book. Yeah. So,
what was the first concert you ever went to?
oh boy, probably at Eastern Illinois University, and I think it was Chad and Jeremy or Peter and Gordon. I always get those two groups mixed up. But I remember it was very nice. I was in high school, and it was sort of a big deal to drive over there and go to a concert.
How many geese do you think it would take to kill a crocodile?
Depends on how fat they were and they choked it, I guess. So I'd take it straight. Yeah.
What is the name of the teddy bear behind you in the chair?
Oh, I think it has like honey on it. Yeah, that's a long story. That thing goes way back.
We're gonna get that story later in the future when we see you in person. We're asking you about the teddy bear.
I'll bring
what was the first car you ever had?
Oh, I love that car. It was a used 1962 Volkswagen Beetle. It was sort of like a pea green. Well, it sort of looked like 5-day-old lemonade. But I love that car. Wish I could get it back.
I recently found out on my 23andMe that I did that I was originally told I was mostly Hungarian, but it turns out I'm mostly Irish. What's the first thing I should do?
Keep away from the booze.
Okay, I deliver beer.
I was about to say.
No, you can deliver it. Just don't get in.
Bob, what is your favorite baseball movie?
Oh, I would say one that people haven't know about too much. Bang the Drum Slowly. It's a great book. That guy was a fan. Mark Harris. If you want to read great baseball fiction, you guys probably already have that series based on that pitcher who's sort of the main character. I've read those things 2 or 3 times. They're fantastic.
What is the first book you ever read?
I think it was a biography of Teddy Roosevelt when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. A little kid's, biography of Teddy Roosevelt.
If you could have one condiment shoot out of your belly button all the time, what condiment would it be?
Well, so that would be something like salt, pepper, mustard, ketchup.
Yeah. But yeah, you can only pick one.
Okay.
You only got one belly button.
I guess mustard.
All right. And last question is you're obviously a historian and a baseball lover. Give me your Mount Rushmore of your personal favorite baseball players, your 4 favorite baseball players of all time.
Oh, of all time? Oh, Christy Mathewson. That would be one. Stan Musial, who I actually old enough to saw play, saw him play a couple of times. Who else? On those Laughing Larry Doyle from the New York Giants, who said it's great to be young and a Giant. So that's 3, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Brock, who I did see play.
There you go.
And a great ball player, but no offense, a miserable excuse for a human being. That includes a lot of ball players, but maybe Pete Rose.
Yeah, he's kind of a jerk. That's what I've learned about Pete Rose. I've never met him, but he doesn't seem like a very nice person. Is he getting into the Hall of Fame after he passes on, Bob?
I don't even,
No, never.
well, that's just me.
Bob?
Maybe he may get in. I don't know.
Well, that's who we're talking to. You're somewhat of a you've got an important voice. So we'll take that and we'll run with it. Pete, you're never getting in. Sorry. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you
Robert
for having me.
Sampson, you were amazing. This was worth the wait. I knew it was a good get back when we very first talked about it. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good interview. You did not disappoint. You were amazing. You brought a lot of history and common sense to this podcast, and I don't know whether to say thank you or to be scared of what everyone's going to think of when they hear this. They're not used to that level of knowledge. Rudy, why don't you say what you got to say to Bob and then get us out of here? But then I want you to stay on. So
absolutely. Bob, I wish you safe travels and all the best in your VBBA presentation. And for the barrel roller and droopy drawers, I'm the Swamp Fox telling you to keep it station to station, and I'll see you out in the field.
All right. Thank you, guys. Been great.
Thanks, Bob. Peace out, everyone.
Bye.
Holy cow, Rudy, that was good.
Hey, you know what this means, right? It's all downhill from here because that was just great.
I mean, that act absolutely raises the bar that I'm not trying to raise.
Yeah. we can't meet that expectation. Don't raise that bar.
No. What?
It's it's a good it's a good conversation, a good guest when you just want to shut up and listen. Like, I did not want him to give away too much because we're trying to sell a book here. He has a presentation that people are going to pay to go see on Saturday. I was just like, man, I could listen to him talk and tell stories for hours.
I absolutely feel the same way.